monarchs. We cannot wait to see you in August. Well, to lay the groundwork for our conversation today and this amazing artwork, I'm so glad to introduce to you Dr. Colin Strong. He has a master's and doctoral degrees in folklore, ethnomusicology, and African studies, and he's won a number of Fulbright scholarships and other grants to study in West Africa and the United States. He's consulted with Carnegie Hall and the Smithsonian, along with the National Endowment for the Arts. And at ODU, he oversees public initiatives spanning arts and humanities. Dr. Colin Strong, thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And I'm very grateful to be here with everyone in this moment. The exhibition that we will see today was developed originally for viewing in the Good Theater at Old Dominion University during our year-long programming for the 400th anniversary of the first African landing in 1619 at Point Comfort in the English colony of Virginia. This year, a tremendous team effort produced coursework, panel discussions, guest speakers, arts programming, and other projects, all made possible by ODU's Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, African American and African Studies programs, and the offices of the President, Academic Affairs, Intercultural Relations, Community Engagement, College of Fine Arts and Letters, Arts at ODU, and many other units and community partners. Dr. Melvina Sumter spearheaded this year-long focus at ODU and also has provided some wonderful quotations from students to share with you today. Well, after having to close the exhibit early because of the global pandemic, there was the opportunity to think about how we could continue offering access to the exhibit. And one solution was to create a virtual version. So having created this virtual version, my role today is primarily to step into the background and operate it for you, following Mr. Ellis's lead as he walks us through, much like we were together in the same space. Once the exhibit is shared on screen, you can look for controls to make the exhibit appear larger or smaller as you prefer. And you can submit questions and comments at any time through the webinar's Q&A tool. I'd like to encourage you to follow at ODU Arts on social media, where we'll also post this program later so that others who could not attend today can still benefit. Well, today is Juneteenth, which commemorates the ending of slavery in the United States, and which Governor Ralph Northam has this very week declared a holiday in the Commonwealth of Virginia. He asked that we recognize the importance of the day by taking action to celebrate the freedom and achievements of African Americans. And that's exactly what each of us gathered here is doing. So thank you for participating. Now, Mr. Ted Ellis is an artist and cultural historian serving as vice chair of the National 400 Years of African American History Commission. For several decades, he has created more than 5,000 paintings that capture scenes from churches, courtrooms, families, and everyday lives of African Americans spanning 4 centuries and responding to current events. The city of Selma, Alabama, commissioned him as the official artist for the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights March known as Bloody Sunday. And he's been the featured artist for the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation and for official Juneteenth observances in Texas and Washington, D.C. We're so proud to have him with us for Virginia's very first official Juneteenth holiday. He's an entrepreneur with a heart for education and too many accolades to list. So with that, we welcome you, Mr. Ted Ellis.
Wow. Well, Colin, thank you very much. Kathy, you as well. This is a phenomenal opportunity to speak about my passion, my commitment in preserving African American history and culture. I've been aggressively at it for close to about 30 years right now. This exhibition was part of my master's thesis project. And I'm very proud about this collection and body of work. It resonates. It begins with slavery. It moves through Reconstruction, through the redemptive period, through the Jim Crow era, civil rights, age of Obama, and currently where we are right now. We're going to begin this exhibition, and I want to talk about, since it's Juneteenth, it's important. If we can focus, Colin, on the Free at Last painting. So it's appropriate that we start this discussion and this dialogue with this painting because today is Juneteenth. In 2006, I was invited to participate in a program at Stringfellow Orchards, and it was a comprehensive program of commemorating and celebrating Juneteenth. You had multiple families, you had oral history being shared, you had gentlemen playing the drum, you actually had Buffalo Soldiers, if you want to call it, color troops were there. And I had the opportunity to paint on location. And with that in mind, I took some of those elements and incorporated into Free at Last. It was done in Stringfellow, about 10 miles apart from Galveston, Texas. Here you have the enslaved with hand over heart showing his allegiance to country, his head held high, still dignified, tears in his eye. You have 1865, which you see across his chest. You have the broken chain representing freedom. You have the matriarch telling the story, and you see the fabric of the quilt, sort of like it looks like it's unraveled, but the story is still not complete. The story is still being told and woven. You have the functionality of the family being brought back together, hand in hand, heads bowed, showing allegiance to God and faith. Behind them, embedded into the house, is the Emancipation Proclamation. On top of the house, standing vigilant, are the colored troops. And then over here, you have the Jubilee and celebration of freedom. That's Frederick Douglass, the great orator, symbolically standing there. And to the far back, you see Harriet Tubman saying, "This way north." Now, the resiliency and the strength through the struggle to survive is a representation of the oak tree. And the roots run deep. Our roots run deep through this country. The symbolism of the drum, how they communicated from plantation was by the drum. And if you step back, you would see the state of Texas outlined in this piece. Now, 2015, I had the opportunity to get recognized for the 150th anniversary of Juneteenth by the city and county of Galveston. Subsequently, the painting was well received on the U.S. Capitol, on the House and the Senate side in 2015. We received proclamations from Senator Cornyn as well as Congressman Randy Weber. And it is currently placed right now in a Bryan Museum that preserves Texas history. So that's a very important painting right there. Now, Colin, we can go ahead and go toward the virtual tour and walk through there, and I can narrate about several pieces. Now, Colin mentioned earlier on Bloody Sunday, it's interesting with this piece because for the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, the 57-mile march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, I was asked by the city council and the mayor to create a painting that would reflect that day when they finally were able to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge and move and march toward Montgomery, Alabama at the state capitol to fight and argue persuasively against the injustices that had transpired throughout the United States during that time. So this was the actual piece. This was Edmund Pettus Bridge that they had to fight the resistance of the police, the state troopers, but they eventually won over. They broke through the barrier, and subsequently change began because of that valiant march. That's Bloody Sunday, the official piece for the 50th anniversary. I thought it was a great opportunity because you had the first African-American president, and he found his way to Selma, Alabama for the 50th anniversary. We can continue, Colin. And I think it's just easier if we can just go through each one of the pieces as if we were walking through the exhibition. That's my Freedom Riders piece. It's interesting. The first attempt for the Freedom Riders failed, and that was sponsored by Congress for of racial equality. Subsequently, the younger students, SNCC took over, and eventually, they started in Washington, D.C. It ended in Jackson, Mississippi. They had bloodied encounters. John Lewis was with those students during that time, and he was assaulted, but he came through it. It was an effective protest. They eventually ended up in New Orleans. Subsequently, they left New Orleans, and they flew back to their desired places of living. But you see, it went all the way from DC down to Atlanta, Anniston, Alabama, right next to Birmingham, Jackson, Mississippi, and that's sort of where it kind of broke up a little bit. They reorganized. They got to New Orleans. You had Dookie Chase, Miss Chase, providing protection for those who had arrived in New Orleans. Got the students and those folks, those activists, on planes and buses out of New Orleans and got them to a safe place in Haven. Let's move on to the next. So this is a great piece right here. We can focus on Built on Our Backs. And that's so indicative of slavery in the United States. So 16, 19, 20 or so enslaved Africans arrived Point Comfort, Virginia, which is Fort Monroe. If you can see over here, 1865, 2 years outside the Emancipation Proclamation, Juneteenth, 10 million souls lost through the Middle Passages. When we talk about the global impact of slavery, sugar, cotton, tobacco, rice, juxtaposed against the slave is the Statue of Liberty. The pain, sweat, blood and tears and life lost because of slavery. At the base of commerce in the United States is free labor. So that's indicative with the slaves right there working, and you sort of see the Twin Towers right there. You have the bill note of the dollar, George Washington, the first president. Then you have the $5 bill over here with Abraham Lincoln, who ushered in the Emancipation Proclamation. And subsequently, you have the different currencies from the different countries that benefited from those who were enslaved. That is the painting Built on Our Backs. Right below it is the journey. And the journey is actually a diptych. So it reads from the slave ship to the cotton field to the boardroom to the president of the United States. It's interesting, when I had my exhibition at Houston Community College, I had looked at my complete body of work I had at the time in 2015. And I said, I need to do one painting that would be the summation of the whole exhibition. And I came up with the journey, and it was the man instead of the woman. And I was so proud that I thought I had this profound narrative that encapsulated the whole story. One of the students raised their hand and says, well, where's the image of the female? And so before the exhibition closed, in 30 days, I did the journey too, which we're looking at. And she's there, from the slave ship to the cotton field. She has a child right there. A child is with her every step of the way. She completes she's still looking toward the future. And she has a book in her hand, which is the Bible, the faith that gives her strength, to face the mounting challenges that still exist. So that is the journey. We can go ahead, Colin, and push forward. And we can focus on Colin Kaepernick, since that's a current piece. It's interesting, the position he took looking at the injustices that African Americans had faced, the staunch police brutality. And he made a decision that says, I'm going to sacrifice my position as an NFL football player to make a statement, to be socially and socially conscious and active. to say that, we need to right the wrong. We need to face these injustices. So it cost him his job. But in his painting, what I wanted to speak to what he was trying to say in his protest, from 1619, we have faced insurmountable odds as African Americans because of policies, because of laws, have created an unjust environment toward African Americans. And in that, the recent protests, right below 1619, you see the police in a riot gear, and this happened during the Baltimore excursion when the gentleman back was broken and he was in custody of the police, and protests began. Up in his this part around his face, you see the protests during the 1960s. I'm a man, that marches with the sanitation workers. Muhammad Ali, Carlos with the Olympics, the 3 Olympians who held their fist up in protest. So the imagery, the iconography is so specific to a certain point in time. I want to be able to narrate that. And we think about the chains that are appropriately coming from around his neck, like we're choked with oppression. But through the struggle, he's still dignified. That is my painting that speaks to what has happened in the past and what we are faced with right now, that we can have honest dialogue toward healing. And it's critically important that this exhibition has a voice and that ODU is providing that platform for that to happen. We can move forward, Colin, in the exhibition. So as you sort of kind of move down, you have Lyndon Baines Johnson, the President of the United States. That's the Fair Housing Act that he's signing into law in 1968. And that was an important piece because when we talk about equity and ownership, housing is critically important because it's a place of protection, a place of safety, and a place of ownership. So that helped tremendously in the process of healing our nation in a way that we would have equitable financing for African Americans in the United States. It showed a real commitment outside the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Now, if we move up further, you'll see the painting of John Lewis, and definitely the soul of the civil rights movement. Tremendously dedicated on all fronts. I mean, he dared to put himself at risk to continue to fight and advocate for freedom for African Americans in the United States. This piece has a strong composition to the story, the confrontation of injustice, through nonviolent means. He has the presidential medal that he received from President Obama, still a champion. You see that walk for justice with Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King right here. The direct protest in Selma, Alabama, below the bridge and on top of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I tried to create the actual signs. We march for justice. Same challenges that we have right now. 1960, the Greensboro set-in, the student protest. He was right there. When the bus burned in Anniston, Alabama, John Lewis was right there. You see the hanging of the tree. That was the first killing of an African American in Montgomery. It's Montgomery, Alabama. John Lewis is originally from Alabama. So I wanted to have those elements in there to speak to his story as being a champion for African Americans, a champion for the Constitution to hold up to its intent and purpose, that we are all equal under the law. We should be treated equally under the law. So a very profound and significant piece. You can continue, Colin.
Colin, while Cullen is getting focused on the next piece of artwork, it's just an extraordinary exhibit. And one of the things that just strikes me about this is you have this incredible ability to bring in so many images into one painting. And what I found myself wondering while you were walking us through this, and I so appreciate that detail, is what image comes first, or do they all come to you at the same time? How does a painting take shape in your mind?
Wow, Kathy, that's a great question. It's one of processing. You sort of ingest as much as you can. The way information comes at me, definitely, storytelling is one facet of it. Being a student, I like to read. I try to get as much reference sources as possible. I look at documentaries, and then I decide, how do I want to construct a painting in a way that it makes people think, in a manner that they're not so much angry, but they're looking to find a solution after the evidence is presented, and hopefully that it appeals to the highest standard of humanity. Out of compassion, out of care, out of love, that we do the right thing, that we say and we can own up to our problems honestly. We can gain trust and we can move forward. And so those are the compelling things that are in me when I decide to paint and put something on canvas to speak. It's my reverency. It's my pulpit. Painting says nothing, but it says everything. And so I wanted to be honest. I wanted to emote. I definitely have to feel what I paint. And so, you asked me earlier, Ted, what are you working on? And I was like, it's so much to process, to speak to it. When we get to the last painting, I knew I had to say something about our current times right now, not to be divisive, but to bring us all to the middle, because, we're in a tough place right now. And so being a vessel to enlighten, to teach, those are careful things that I weigh in when I paint.
Thank you for that look at your process. It's fascinating. Where do you want to take us next?
Oh, we can keep going. We can look at the contraband piece, because that's important, and that's up toward the top. So while Cullen is adjusting that, it's interesting because General Benjamin Butler, when the 3 enslaved ran away and ran to Fort Monroe for safety, it was interesting because General Butler could easily say, I'm going to just have to not open the gates or take you in and then turn you over. But he didn't. He said that they were contraband of war, and they found their freedom at Fort Monroe. Because of that, afterwards, you had close to maybe, I want to say, between 3,000 to 6,000 enslaved finding their way to Fort Monroe for freedom, escaping and coming to Fort Monroe. Well, that was pretty much the precursor, the Contraband Act, to the emancipation. Also, when you think about the freedmen schools that were created from the freedmen bureaus, the precursor to that were the contraband schools. Mary S. Peake, an African-American school teacher, was one of the very first freed women who could read and write that taught those who were enslaved. And so the contraband of war was a critical act during a very tough time during the Civil War. So I thought that was important. Absolutely. Go ahead, Cullen, we can just kind of keep moving. And if we could, William Carney, who was the first African-American from Norfolk to receive the Medal of Honor. Right below that, you have educating the mind, and a lot of symbolism in this piece. They're looking toward the future. Knowledge is pouring through them to inform them, but they're not losing what. Push it over to not to the steam one, to the other one, Colin. I'm sorry. If you can move to the left.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, the diptych. And if you see in their spine, it's the slave ship that's embedded in their spine. So that's to remind them that they don't forget their past as they continue to prep for the future. And so, you know, education is profound, it's enlightening, and it's something that's critically important. And so I thought that would resonate with those who looked at this and would respond. Typically, the students are always engaged in this painting. Now we're going to go to the royal family.
Love this.
And this is a really important painting. When we were the 400 commission was there for the commemoration of 1619. We had the opportunity to go and visit the Tucker Cemetery, and very, very moving, very spiritual. You could feel the presence of spirits there. Honestly, the canopy of trees, it was a bright sunny day. The pine trees are some of the tallest pine trees in that area. And, you know, I just imagine, you know, what was that like, you know, back there, what the responsibility in the moment right now, the reflection of, you know, 400 years in that moment right now. So I thought about the royal family. I had conversations with Dr. Melvina Sumter, and she said, you know, you really need to do a painting on that. And I just took the time. I thought about it, and I said, you know, let me put myself in there. So when I thought about the 20 or so odd enslaved Africans, you have 20 trees to represent that. You know, the first royal family, this is a family that we could look back to and say, you know, from the Genesis under 1619, here's an African-American family that we can point to. And I imagine, you know, from that family, I think about, you know, that responsibility to community and to family, you know, being there, you know, nurturing, supporting, taking care of each other. You saw that and you witnessed that on that commemoration day. So I thought it was critically important that I sit still and paint a painting that spoke to the first African-American royal family in the United States. That's right there in Virginia, right there in Hampton. So a very important painting that reflects our history and our heritage, not only African-American heritage, but American history. So
it's beautiful.
Now next to it, let's go to, well, we have the White Line ship. And on that ship, that's the ship that 20 or so enslaved Africans arrived. And from the arc of 1619, you have 47 million African Americans here in the United States. That has contributed to the building and development of America and has made an international impact. Just a profound image. Right underneath of that, you have Rumors of War, and that's a statue that's actually at the state capitol in Virginia, in Richmond. It was created by a living famous African-American artist, Kehinde Wiley. It's an image of an African-American on horseback with his hood and his braids on. And it's like, okay, you know, it's a way to speak to the newness of where we are right now. And I was thinking about, with the deconstruction of all the other monuments, I didn't know if this had received any kind of graffiti or anything while folks were protesting against the old Confederate statues and monuments that were in the state of Virginia. It'd be interesting to see how people have responded to this monument as well. But I thought it was important because this was the first time that Virginia, a policy state, had erected a major significant sculpture of an African American that was very contemporary. And so you talk about facing some hard decisions and hard challenges. The Daughters of the Confederate, the monuments that exist not only in Virginia but throughout the United States, that people are having an aversion to and removing because it represents oppression, and then to mount this, the care and thought and courage that it takes to move forward. To move forward is to be commended. The journey is not complete. The struggle continues, but we're moving in the right direction. And I have on the left hand side the child pointing, seeing himself being monumentalized in a sense. So just wanted to make some kind of statement there that a child sees a reflection of himself and the potential of him aspiring to be that person at some time in the future. And we can go ahead, Colin, and move over to this painting of the Woolworth painting. Now, I sort of, when I was working on my black and white series, I wanted to reflect on the past, but also push forward toward the future. And I put that in color. And the question mark, what kind of America are we going to become? So 1960, Greensboro, North Carolina, these four gentlemen decided that they wanted to go to Woolworth and present themselves in a way that they were equal citizens. So these students that were at North Carolina A&T went to Woolworth and protest, and they were part of that founding group of student nonviolent coordinating committee that were very, very much instrumental in participating in reform and social reform and civic reform around the country, the way we see what's happening right now. The fact that he's holding the flag is saying that I am an American. I'm entitled to the rights and the liberties of every American, through the due process of justice and law. What you can't see, I have Foot Locker right there. And if you some of the history of the Woolworth family, their investitures are into Foot Locker. So I kind of quietly put that into my painting for some historical posterity. Colin, you can go right above the Woolworth painting. And so, here's Rosa Parks, on that day, she decided to sit down versus standing up and, and making a stand. And, rightfully so, she did not want to go sit at the back of the bus. She wanted to be respected as a equal human being, as an equal citizen in the United States. And that brought about boycott and protests that helped to change and facilitate, the laws that govern the land and the way people live in the United States. It's something to be said when folks get out and get uncomfortable and they see what's wrong and we protest and change happens. I know that change is going to happen. The process has started again. Is it a challenge for a young country? It is for a young country. Will we make those changes? Yes, we will make those changes. because we look to the best in humanity. We know the difference between right and wrong. We will always make the decision to do what's right, even if tradition has done something different, even if our customs have done something different. The issue at hand is what's right and wrong. And when you're a learned individual, particularly a learned individual, and you understand the difference between right and wrong, we do better. That is the expectation of humanity. That is our charge and responsibility as we continue to build, we continue to engage, we continue to enlighten, and we continue to teach. And we use certain elements and instruments to make that happen. And, I use art for that. ODU provides a unique venue and platform for that. It's an academic institution that has a diverse audience, 20,000 students, international students, the largest population of African Americans on that campus, close to 7,000 students. The programming is intentional. The policy by the president of the university is intentional. The focus is diversity and inclusion, participation. There's a high level of accountability for us to be that example for the next generation of thought leaders, our students that are on that campus, that are just outstanding. I just want to point back to Dr. Melvina Sumter and her students with the essays that they provided and the narratives that they provided on each one of the paintings. It's enlightening. They recognize that we have to be in a better place, and they've committed themselves to do that. And when you think about the policy and commitment of ODU being that thought leading institution, it gives us hope and optimism that the future will be better and it will be brighter for those who will be engaging like we are right now. So we can move to the next one, Colin.
One question about that, because I noticed in both of those paintings, they're black and white, but the flag in both of those is in color. And when you were just talking about, the hope for the future and the hope that when we know better, we do better. I just wondered what the strategy was, but what was your thinking behind that?
Yeah. We're in the current right now. The past is what we reflect on. That gives us a marker. America then, America now. What does that look like? As we learn from the past. I think we're purpose individuals. We learn through experience, as a function of time. That time should be passed on as a gift to others, what we learn and we share. And, we're here right now. I'm not going any other place. America is the land that birthed me right here. So it's my country too. It's not the perfect country. So let's have this conversation. Let's talk about this, honest dialogue, so that we can build some trust and we can find a better solution for the future. And, that's why we're having this presentation, this introduction on Juneteenth. I was telling Colin that this has to be the example for every other academic institution, on what needs to happen in our communities, that we get a chance to engage, we get a chance to understand and appreciate it. Tess, a lot of folks say you're painting a lot of Black images. I say, well, it's my history, my culture. It's African American history and culture, but it's American history and culture. And we have to all be comfortable with that, whether it's Irish, Italian, Chinese. It's just we got to have that level of appreciation, of that cultural equity across the board, and that's programmed in our institutions. It got to be equitable in our laws and our policies. That's what people are saying right now. the majority of protests is not just African Americans. It's people of every ethnic origin out there protesting. And it's a lot of folks that are under 30 years of age. It's our future. And so we have to recognize that. We have to make those adjustments. And it's something that we're responsible for. Every generation is responsible for making the next generation lives a little bit easier and better. And if we don't, we fail. We failed ourselves and we fail the future. And so we're responsible, and we do our parts. And outside of being an artist and get my master's, prior to that, I was a chemist. And in a chemical equation, you got two components. You have A and B, and you're looking for C. Well, more than likely, you get a byproduct D that's better than what you were looking for, but you didn't expect. We didn't expect this virtual tour, that we can reach the world instantaneously, that we could make a statement about healing the racial divide, that we can come into the middle, and we could use art as an instrument to do that. And so that's the piece of hope. That's the other unexpectancy, but it's also the ripple effect with our intentions, if they're the right intentions. It's tough sometimes, but we get through it for the greater good. And so that's what we're trying to do here. That's what I'm trying to do. And, I got to continue to thank, Old Dominion University. I never thought that I'd be right here right now, having that chance moment with Dr. Sumter and meeting her, and then having the exhibition here, working with Colin for engagement, and and talking and sharing, something so vital, so critical, so important as it relates to our being.
We're going to get questions in just about 10 minutes or so. So can you take us to another painting? Where would you like to go?
Yeah, we could go to, we got Plessy versus Ferguson, since we're right there. So this is when they were trying to, what Rosa Parks did almost 100 years earlier, when Plessy went on the streetcar and he says, I have every right to sit here. Well, it went to the Supreme Court justice. It was shot down, and 1896 was just devastating. You had the redemptive period, the Jim Crow laws coming in, and so forth and whatnot. But prior to that, in 1877, you had the Great Compromise with Ruther B. Hayes and stuff, which pulled all the federal troops and stuff out of the South. And then you subsequently, had these this act of suppression through laws and so forth and whatnot, and policies. Just a frightful time. I have the water fountain here. You don't see the color in it, but the blood, through that whole period in time, it moved up to the point that, the early parts of the 1900s, 1800s, you sort of the advent of a lot of African-American organizations that were espousing, equal justice. You had the W. Du Bois, the reconstruction of the image of the Negro, the new Negro. The whole Harlem Renaissance was sort of created to speak to that. When you had the writers, the artists, the musicians and stuff, to create this image that we're important, that we contribute. And just this was an incredulous time for us. The last piece I'll go to, Kathy, if we have, is the piece that I just completed.
Yes.
So the title of the piece, once we get to it, is "Our Time Has Come," and it's indicative of the current protests against the police injustice, police brutality,
It really is an extraordinary piece of work, and the thing that was, we'll get it
Okay.
to our viewers in just a moment. But the thing that was so interesting to me is how quickly the images of this just must have gelled very quickly, because it's an extraordinary piece.
Yeah, Kathy, just this time, you're faced with a health pandemic, you're faced with an economic pandemic, this racial pandemic that we've been dealing with. I mean, that's a lot of emotions to process. And prior to doing that painting, my focus was on the frontliners, those in the medical profession, and I did a series of medical pieces that spoke to that. These folks who put their lives at risk immediately. And I thought, and I wanted to capture that. And I wanted to say, thank you for that sacrifice, because, it personally touched my family. Nurses were taking care of my mother-in-law. She was struggling for her life and putting themselves at risk. So in my own kind of personal way, I wanted to speak to that. And so I did those pieces. In between that, I had been working on my Color of Music series. And I stopped right in the middle. And I says, I got to do something that speaks to this right now. I said, it's just enough is enough, what is happening and transpiring. And as I said earlier, I wanted to speak to healing, in this moment. And I came up with this. As I felt that I was painting it, it's actually created on a fence, we're on this fence, this metaphor in a sense. And, I want justice for George. I am human too. Am I next? Racism is a pandemic. Black Lives Matter, vote. And 1619, through all the struggle, it's still a fight, for justice. And, the death of George Floyd, in broad daylight, on national TV, you saw it, when it was shown, saying I can't breathe and asking for his mother. There was a yield of compassion and recognition that this is wrong. As I mentioned earlier, there's something about the difference between right and wrong, and humanity will, to its higher order, move in the direction of what's right, no matter what it is traditionally, culturally indifferent, is that we're going to do the right thing. And that's what you see in this protest. I mean, it's been a global protest. It is a global protest. And we are in the midst of change right now. It's what I've been speaking of against the injustices through my narrative paintings and telling that story, that, I am one of resiliency, one of struggle, one of perseverance, and one of triumph, and one of gift and one of sharing. I mean, if I could speak for, all Africans, I have worth. This human capital is important. It gives to society. And the level of reciprocity in that, it's a shame when we find ourselves, being oppressed, continually oppressed, and being taken advantage by guardians. Law enforcement is our guardians, our protectors. And if you don't feel safe, then there's a big question there. Who are we? Who are we at the end of the day? And so I'm hopeful that we are better than what we've seen, better than what we've acted, that people can change, we can change. And given that benefit of doubt, I move with the passion and purpose to enlighten and to share and to heal. So I want to just personally thank, Old Dominion University for giving me this opportunity to share my passion with purpose, to enlighten others, to change others, to inform others about who we are, as human beings, and what we've done, what we've accomplished, and how we can all be better. We need to move to the middle. We need to heal. We need to live the gift of a better future for our children, and we're responsible. So thank you.
Hi, Mr. Ellis. I believe Kathy Lewis may have lost connection. So
yeah, something happened.
Yeah. So if you're okay with it, I'd like to ask you a few of the questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Came through on our end.
Okay.
So the first question is, how did you make the transition from chemistry to art?
Okay, so not a tough question. I was always an artist. The parental influence was that, son, you got to go do something other than art. I did well academically in school, so I took on the challenge of, majoring in chemistry. I thought I was going to be a doctor or an engineer, but that didn't happen. I worked as an environmental chemist, and I kept at my passion. I would, paint, after I left my job as a chemist, and I did those things sort of like a hobby, and I was always entrepreneurial, so I would participate in art festivals. And at some point in time, I wind up saying, I want to do my art full time. It helped that I had gotten a major contract with Avon Product Inc. and then Walt Disney, and it just took off from there. And I never looked back. It's been close to 30 years full time as a professional artist. Yes.
That's amazing. We have a couple more questions. The next one is, what topics or issues, either historical or current, do you think you'll be tackling next in your work?
Oh, I'm definitely going to be in this lane about being that social change agent, making people think about, what's going on, what that looks like, those policy and issues that determine how we live. When we make a policy, it's typically culturally centered, and that we have equity in that when we make these policies attached with budgets, and budgets become laws. And so, what that looks like when you share those narratives. The museum world definitely has it right. That informal methodology of putting objects and images and artifacts and art in front of folks so that they can learn, they can become familiar, they can share that with others. Typically, I'm going to grab hold to that image or that emotion within me to speak to that, so that we're in a place that we're comfortable with each other.
Christine, I want to thank you for jumping in. I have no idea what happened, but something happened and we got disconnected, which was a sadness for me. Ted Ellis, we have some questions in the chat, and this is definitely the time to put yourself in the chat with any questions you may have. One of our guests wants to know where your work is ordinarily or customarily on display, and there's a lot of interest in wondering whether Old Dominion will
Okay, so I can't hear Kathy now, but I think the end of the question is, the possibilities of this exhibition continuing. Certainly, I'd like to see it travel. I'd like to see us build dialogue around the different images, the different narratives, so that we're very comfortable in that space. I think art makes it very palatable for us to engage each other. It'll arouse our sensibilities. We can manage the hard questions and discussions centered around art. Each one of those we could have some conversation. The STEM piece in technology, how that impacts our communities, particularly those of color. To enlighten the youth now. I think that's critically important. We had the piece with our 5 queens with the 5 beauty pageants, major beauty pageants. All of them are of African American origin, except for the young lady from South Africa. But that's a discussion. So I see this exhibition being a facilitator and discussion around racial issues and healing and stuff. Talking about these inequities that impact our communities. So So that's where it's at. Definitely my website, telsfineart.com. You'll see a lot of my images. But the exhibition, I think, will partly be influenced by those who would like to engage that discussion and dialogue. So it may be on additional campus, definitely other museums, cultural centers. I've shown in Washington, D.C., on the Hill, and it may end up back there. We'll see. We'll continue to plan, and we'll continue to partnership with Old Dominion University and give that some thought, how we can be very efficient in making that constructive impact of change.
Ted, if I could, I just wanted to build briefly on what you're saying about the combination of art and museums and education. The references that you have in this exhibition to Greensboro, North Carolina, are especially meaningful to me because I was born and raised in Greensboro and came up through an educational system there in public schools that was so highly diverse, that I had no idea that anything was different from that in the world. And it was really an environment where you just naturally, as a child, learn to love everyone around you, for who they are, and sort of the surface issues that you might see on the outside, what their skin color looks like, hair color, all of those things were just kind of there, but they weren't tools to be used, to create division. And Woolworth was still open when I was a little kid. I used to go in there, and I remember when I learned about the significance of it, I was just so amazed that something that important in human history had happened right there where I lived. And speaking of museums, they've made it into a museum now. And when it's safe to do so, I would encourage everybody to put that on your bucket list and go to that museum, take the guided tour. They still have all the old two-sided Coke machines and floor plans of, white and colored waiting rooms. And I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing to see, and to see just how our society can change over time, and slowly become better.
Mr. Ellis, we have a lot of questions in the queue that
Wow.
that I know that have a lot. There's a lot around institutional issues like housing policies and the like. But there are a lot of people who are really incredibly amazed at the volume of work that you have put out. And it's all so important. And one of our viewers wants to know that last piece, the last one that speaks to the protests that we're actively watching now. How long did that take you from the images come in your head to there's a painting?
So Kathy, I'm going to leave this discussion. I'm gonna get in my little rag outfit that I paint, and I'm gonna use this, to speak to something. I think I've probably in the last 4 days watched 10 documentaries, and it's I watched the story of Emmett Till, and his mother sharing that story. The things I want to pull out and speak to that specifically. Am I Your Negro? I watched that piece, and I just listened to Nikki Giovanni, and what she was saying, and there's so many other influences there that I channel through and I paint. That exhibition, I mean, what you see, it's I could say the summation of my time painting. But if you want to say in the context of time, some of those paintings that I have in my collection, and when I have at ODU, Old Dominion University, is probably I want to say a third of because we didn't have the space, and so we had to manage that space. But I'm always trying to find something to speak about African American history and culture. Some stories we're familiar with, some we're not, and but they're stories that need to be shared, narratives that need to be told. There's not enough time in the day for me, so I try to execute as much as I can when I have the time, and in this space, this academic space, we did for this exhibition, we did, I want to say, close to about 7 specific pieces that relate to Hampton Roads and Norfolk. So when you look at, General Benjamin Butler, the Contraband of War, Mary S. Peake, Sergeant Carney, who received the Medal of Honor, the Royal Family, Rumors of War, those were all specific pieces in a relatively short period of time that I got ready for the exhibition. But I thought they were critically important to speak to. And so I just need to have more time of day to paint, but that's just not the total responsibility of me as the artist. So I need Cullen to help pick up a paintbrush. Yes.
Fair enough. We should probably ask you this one last question because I know that we are right at time, but I think if we're talking about art and we're talking about this moment, we have a questioner who wants to know what advice you would have for a minority African-American art student and aspiring artist. What advice would you have?
Just reflecting and looking at myself is that, your glass has to be half full versus half empty. You got to find something that's very constructive, no matter how difficult it is, to pull something out of that it's going to build something that's good and constructive. Other than that, you're doing the opposite. And artists yield a tremendous amount of power, whether that's a poet, whether that's a writer, whether that's a singer, a dancer, it emotes. It emotes. So I have to be careful about how my images emote, how it's going to move a person, if it's going to bring tremendous anger to make them act the wrong kind of way. That's not who I am. That's not what I want to do. So my advice to that artist is to paint with love, paint with passion. You can paint with purpose. You can change folks' mind through your passion and your love. It has to come through. I think that has been a success of my art and my imagery. That what's in me comes out. And there's trust. We talked about trust. There's trust in my art. There's truth in my art that we can have this conversation and we can talk about it. We can think about it. And so I would tell that young artist, think about those things when you're creating art. Enjoy that moment in what you do. That's important. I paint a lot of landscapes and seascapes, but they sometimes do the same thing. They make people feel good. Yeah. And as an artist, that's what you're supposed to do. And there's so much joy in that. There's a lot of joy in that. And I would say, do it every day. Do it every day if you can. That means that you're creating. That means that you're learning. That means that you're reading. And watch what it does for you. I said earlier, like a chemist in a chemical equation, there's two components, A and B. You look for C. More than likely, there's a byproduct. When your intentionality is for the right reasons. It always happens. I was at an event, the NAACP convention, as a judge for the youth, the AXO program. And I happened to be exhibiting, and the folks from Walt Disney came by, and I was talking to the students, sharing with them. And the representative from Walt Disney says, "Would you have an interest in one of our projects?" And I said, "Sure." It says it's going to be competitive, but I eventually was awarded the project. I did Walt Disney's first commemorative African-American poster in 1998. Wow. And if you were on the campus in Lake Point Vista, Florida, my artwork was all over the campus. I didn't expect that. It was buttons, greeting cards, posters. You had every major celebrity coming up to me asking me to sign a print. And so your passion with some purpose will give you opportunities that you didn't even expect. There are going to be expectations out of this virtual exhibition that I have no idea what's going to happen for all of us.
Yeah, to be ready.
Right.
Ted Ellis, what a joy it has been to talk with you today. You should definitely, what is the name of your website so that people can know and learn more about your work?
Wow. So it's tellisfineart.com. And then my Instagram, I think that's easy. T Ellis Fine Art. And that's two of the easiest ways to find me.
I have a feeling you got a lot of followers after today from all over the world. And so
That's amazing.
I do want to thank all of you for being with us today. This has been our first effort in the ODU Summer Arts Series. And so we'll be bringing you more of them. You can follow us at ODU Arts on social media. You can log on to ODU's website, odu.edu/arts, and we'll be announcing some of the additional programs at that point. Colin Strong, thank you for all that you have done to bring Ted Ellis to us today. Thanks to all of the others on your team and who collaborated at Old Dominion to make this possible. And Mr. Ellis, thank you, kind sir. You have been such a joy to meet, and your art
Wow.
is so inspiring. And we look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Wow. Thanks, guys. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.